"You're not his real daughter. Get out." My dad said that to me at my grandmother's 85th birthday party in front of 60 family members. Then he pointed to the woman standing beside him, my stepmother's biological daughter, and said, "Chelsea is my real daughter now." I stood there, in a cream-colored dress my late mother had given me, holding a birthday cake I'd spent 4 hours baking, and watched my father choose someone else's child over his own. But what my dad didn't know, what nobody in that room knew, was that the real daughter standing beside him had been draining his bank accounts for 6 months, and my husband had the proof in his briefcase sitting in our car outside. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if the story hits close to home. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know where you're listening from. My name is Rachel, I'm 34, and this is the story of the night I almost lost my father forever, and how the truth saved us both. Let me take you back to 5 years before that party, to the day everything started falling apart. My dad, Robert Chen, was a high school chemistry teacher for 32 years. He was the kind of father who helped me build a volcano for the science fair when I was 8, who taught me the periodic table using made-up songs, and who never missed a single one of my track meets, even the ones that started at 7 a.m. on Saturday mornings. My mom, Susan, was a librarian. She smelled like old books and vanilla tea, and she kept a handwritten recipe box with index cards in her own cursive. Every Sunday, she'd make blueberry pancakes from scratch, using a recipe her grandmother had taught her. Dad would sit at our kitchen table grading papers, while I'd sit across from him doing homework. Mom's chair was between us, always filled, always warm. She died of a stroke when I was 28. Sudden, no warning. One morning, she was reorganizing the fiction section at the library, and by that evening, she was gone. Dad didn't fall apart where I could see it. He kept teaching, he kept grading papers, he kept sitting at that kitchen table. But Mom's chair stayed empty. For 2 years after she died, it was just the two of us eating takeout Chinese food on Sundays because neither of us could make blueberry pancakes without crying. Then Dad told me he'd met someone at a teacher's conference. "She'll never replace your mom," he said. I believed him. Diane Thornton walked into our lives wearing designer sunglasses and talking about her previous marriage to a cardiologist who'd left her emotionally bankrupt but financially comfortable. She had a daughter named Chelsea who was 26, 2 years younger than me, and worked in social media marketing. Dad introduced them over dinner at our house, the house I grew up in, and Diane brought a bottle of wine that cost more than our monthly grocery budget. She complimented the curtains Mom had chosen, asked about my work as a graphic designer, and even offered to help Dad organize his lesson plans. "You're doing too much alone, Robert. Let me help." They got married when I was 30. Small ceremony. Diane wore champagne silk. I wore the cream dress Mom had bought me for my college graduation because it was the only formal thing that felt right. Nobody commented on it. Within 6 months, small things started disappearing. Mom's recipe box vanished from the kitchen counter. "We're going digital," Diane said, holding up her iPad. "I've been entering everything into an app. Much more efficient." The blueberry pancake recipe card was gone. When I asked about it, Diane said she'd probably already scanned it. She'd send it to me. She never did. Thanksgiving that first year, I came downstairs and Mom's china was replaced with modern white plates from Williams and Sonoma. "The old stuff was chipped, sweetheart," Diane explained. "I donated it." It wasn't chipped. I'd used those plates my entire life. Chelsea moved in full-time around then, taking the guest room. Diane redecorated it with floating shelves and a ring light for Chelsea's Instagram content. Chelsea started calling my dad Dad within the first month, and my father, who hadn't smiled much since Mom's funeral, lit up every time she did it. I moved into my own apartment shortly after, got married to James at 31, and tried to build my own life. Every time I visited home, something else had changed. Mom's photo that used to hang in the living room was moved to the hallway, then to a shelf in the garage. Then I couldn't find it anymore. Her garden, the rose bushes she'd planted the year before she died, were pulled up and replaced with decorative gravel. "Low maintenance," Diane said. "Your father doesn't have time for all that upkeep." My childhood bedroom became Chelsea's home office. My things were packed into 2 boxes in the basement. When I asked where my high school yearbooks were, Diane pointed vaguely toward the garage. "We needed this space. Chelsea's building her brand." The pattern was always the same. Diane would remove something small, frame it as practical, and Dad would agree because arguing about dishes and photos felt petty compared to the loneliness he'd been living in. 3 years before the birthday party, I made a mistake that cost me everything. I was managing a major rebranding project for a tech startup. The client was demanding, the deadline was impossible, and Christmas crept up on me like a deadline I'd forgotten to calendar. I called Dad on December 22nd. "Hey, Dad, I am so sorry, but I'm not going to make it for Christmas. This project is—" "It's fine, Rachel." His voice was flat. "Diane and Chelsea are here. We'll be fine." "I'll come for New Year's, I promise. I love you." Silence. Then, "Okay." He hung up. I called back on December 26th. Voicemail. I texted, no response. I tried again New Year's Day. For the next 3 years, I called every week. 156 calls, 73 text messages, 2 attempts to visit the house in person, both times met at the door by Diane. "Rachel, your father asked me to tell you he needs space. You really hurt him by choosing work over family. Please respect his wishes." I could have pushed past her. I could have demanded to see him. But something in me, pride maybe, or dignity, refused to beg. If my father wanted to cut me out, I'd give him the space he apparently needed. It destroyed me, but I gave it to him. That was my mistake. 6 weeks before Grandma's 85th birthday party, James got a phone call from a number he didn't recognize. A woman's voice, cautious and professional. "Is this James Chen? I'm Patricia Alvarez. I'm a financial advisor at Coastal Trust Bank. I need to speak with you about some concerning activity on your father-in-law's accounts." James didn't tell me. Not yet. The invitation arrived via email from my Aunt Linda, not from Dad. "Your grandmother is turning 85. Family gathering at the house, Saturday at 6 p.m. Please come." I stared at that email for an hour. James came into the room and sat beside me. "You should go," he said. "He hasn't spoken to me in 3 years." "Which is exactly why you should go. This might be your only chance to see him with witnesses present." Something about the way James said it, "with witnesses present," struck me as deliberate, but I didn't press him. I chose the cream dress. Mom had given it to me at my college graduation. She'd worn it to her own graduate school ceremony 30 years earlier. It was simple, timeless, and it still smelled faintly of her perfume if I pressed the fabric to my face. I wore it for her, because she couldn't be there. James drove. Dad's house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac in the neighborhood where I'd grown up. Cars lined both sides of the street, family I hadn't seen in years. Inside, the living room was packed. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends. A banner stretched across the fireplace. "Happy 85th birthday, Grandma." Grandma sat in the center of the room in her favorite armchair, beaming. I scanned the room and found my father standing near the kitchen, talking to Diane and Chelsea. He was wearing a navy sweater I'd given him for Father's Day 7 years ago. Chelsea had her arm linked through his, laughing at something he'd said. He saw me. Our eyes met across the room for 1 second. I waited for recognition, for guilt, for anything. He looked away. Diane intercepted me before I could reach him. "Rachel, I didn't think you'd actually come." "Grandma invited me." "Of course," she touched my elbow. "There's cake in the kitchen if you're hungry." She didn't steer me toward my father. She steered me to the periphery. I found Aunt Linda near the punch bowl. She squeezed my hand and leaned close. "I'm glad you came, honey. There are things you need to know." She looked toward my father. "He doesn't know the truth yet, but he will tonight." Before I could ask what she meant, Diane called everyone to attention. "Can we all gather around? Robert has something he'd like to say." The room quieted. Dad stepped forward, Chelsea still attached to his arm like a barnacle. He cleared his throat. "I just want to thank everyone for coming to celebrate my mother's 85th birthday. Family means everything, and I'm grateful to be surrounded by the people who matter most." He paused. "I especially want to thank my daughter Chelsea for being here for me these past few years when I needed support most." Chelsea beamed. A few people clapped politely. I stood 15 feet away, holding a slice of birthday cake I'd baked that morning, Grandma's favorite lemon raspberry, and my father had just thanked his stepdaughter in front of 60 people without acknowledging I existed. Diane's voice cut through the moment. "Actually, Robert, didn't you want to make an announcement?" Dad looked uncomfortable. "Well, Diane and I have been discussing it, and we've decided to update some things, legal things. Chelsea has been such a blessing to this family, and we want to make it official." "What does that mean?" Aunt Linda's voice was sharp. "We're adding Chelsea to the will, as a beneficiary. She deserves to be recognized as family." The room went silent. Not polite silence, shocked silence. I should have left right then, but I'd spent 3 years being erased, and something inside me broke. I walked through the center of the living room, past cousins and aunts who stepped aside like I was crossing a crime scene. I stopped in front of my father. "Dad." He looked at me. His jaw tightened. "Rachel. It's been 3 years. Can we please talk?" Diane stepped between us. "Robert, you don't have to do this." "Do what?" I looked at my father. "Have a conversation with your daughter?" "You made your choice 3 years ago," Dad said, his voice cold. "You chose your career over family." "I missed one Christmas because I had a work deadline. One. And I called you every single week for 3 years. Every week, Dad." "You never called." His voice was certain, absolute. "I called 156 times. You never answered." "That's a lie." Dad's face reddened. "I would have known if you'd called." Chelsea moved closer to him, her hand on his arm. "Dad, she's trying to manipulate you. This is what she does." "I'm not manipulating anyone." I turned to the room. "I've called my father every Sunday for 3 years. He never picked up. I sent texts, emails. I even came to the house twice. Diane turned me away both times." Diane's expression didn't change. "Because Robert asked me to. You broke his heart, Rachel. He didn't want to see you." I looked at my father. "Is that true? You told her to turn me away?" He hesitated. Just for a second, but in that second, I saw doubt flicker across his face. "You're not my real daughter anymore," he said, and his voice cracked on the word real. "Chelsea has been here. She's been the daughter I needed. You chose work. You chose yourself. Now I'm choosing her." He turned to Chelsea, put his arm around her shoulders, and said to the room, "Chelsea is my real daughter now. That's who gets my time. That's who gets everything." I stood there holding Grandma's birthday cake, and I felt 60 pairs of eyes on me. Some pitying, some uncomfortable, some simply watching like this was entertainment. I should have left. I was one step from the door. Then James stood up from the couch where he'd been sitting quietly in the corner. He didn't rush. He set down his drink, buttoned his jacket, and walked across the living room with the calm, measured pace of someone who'd been waiting for exactly this moment. "Mr. Chen," James said, his voice conversational, "before Rachel leaves, I think you should check your bank accounts." The room shifted. Everyone's attention snapped to James. Dad's face went from red to pale. "What are you talking about?" When's the last time you personally logged into your checking account? Diane handles the finances. I know she does. James reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. That's the problem. Diane moved fast. James, this is inappropriate. This is a family gathering, not— You're right, Mrs. Chen. It is a family gathering, which is why Robert's actual family should know that someone has been transferring money out of his accounts without authorization. James opened the folder and pulled out bank statements. He set them on the coffee table in front of my father. $47,000, James said, transferred from your savings account to an account registered under Chelsea Thornton's Business LLC over the past 6 months. The room went dead silent. Chelsea's face went white. That's not— Dad gave me that money. Did you, sir? James looked at my father. Dad picked up the bank statements. His hands were shaking. I didn't authorize any transfers. Diane handles everything. She would have told me if— Check your email, Mr. Chen. The email you use for banking, not the one Diane has access to. Your personal email from your school account. Dad pulled out his phone. His fingers fumbled over the screen. The room watched in complete silence as he scrolled through emails. His face changed, line by line, transfer by transfer. There are 11 transfer confirmations here, he said slowly. I never saw these. How did I never see these? Because someone set up an email filter, James said. Every notification from Coastal Trust Bank was automatically marked as read and moved to a folder called Processed. You'd never see them unless you specifically went looking. Patricia Alvarez, the woman who'd called James 6 weeks earlier, stepped forward from the back of the room. I hadn't even noticed her there. Mr. Chen, I'm Patricia. We spoke once about your retirement account 2 years ago. I tried to call you 3 times last month about the suspicious transfers, but someone kept telling me you'd call back. You never did. Dad looked at Diane. Did you know about this? Diane's mask didn't crack. Not yet. Robert, this is clearly a misunderstanding. Chelsea needed help with her business startup costs. I was going to tell you, but you've been so stressed with retirement planning. $47,000? Dad's voice rose. $47,000 is not a business loan. That's theft. It's not theft when it's family helping family. Diane's tone hardened. Chelsea is your daughter. You said so yourself 2 minutes ago. I said that because you've spent 3 years telling me Rachel abandoned me. She did abandon you. She called 156 times. James pulled out another document, phone records. Every Sunday for 3 years, sometimes twice a week, every single call went to voicemail or was declined. Dad looked down at his phone. His face changed as he navigated to his settings, to his blocked contacts. One number. Rachel's number. You blocked her, he whispered. Diane didn't answer. You blocked my daughter's number. You made me think she'd abandon me. You let me believe it for 3 years while you were stealing from me. I was securing Chelsea's future. Diane's voice finally cracked. Her father left us with nothing. I wasn't going to let that happen again. You have more than enough. You don't even have student loans anymore, Robert. Your house is paid off. You were just sitting on all that money while my daughter was drowning in debt from a business that failed because she didn't have the support she needed. So you stole from me. I redirected funds to someone who actually deserved them. The room erupted, voices overlapping, Aunt Linda shouting, cousins demanding explanations, Grandma asking someone to explain what was happening. Dad stood in his own living room holding bank statements that showed his stepdaughter had siphoned off nearly $50,000 and looked at me across the room. You called every week? I nodded. Every week. And you never knew? You never knew. He looked at Diane. Get out of my house. Robert, get out. Both of you, now. Diane grabbed her purse, Chelsea grabbed her coat. They left through the front door without another word, and the room exhaled like a pressure valve had been released. Dad walked across the living room to where I still stood holding Grandma's cake. He looked at the cream dress and his eyes went wet. "That was your mother's dress." "Yes." "You wore it for me?" "I wore it for her, because she would have wanted to be here." He reached out like he was going to hug me, then stopped. "I don't know if I have the right to touch you after what I just said." "You don't," I said honestly, "but maybe someday you will." 1 week later, Dad filed for divorce. The police opened an investigation into the unauthorized transfers. Chelsea agreed to a repayment plan to avoid criminal charges. 2 weeks later, Dad called me. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing important. The weather, his lesson plans for his last semester before retirement, my latest design project. It wasn't enough to fix 3 years of silence, but it was a start. 1 month later, I went to his house for dinner, just the two of us. He'd found Mom's recipe box in the garage, tucked inside a cardboard box labeled donations. The blueberry pancake recipe was still inside, in Mom's cursive. We made pancakes together. We burnt the first batch. We laughed. We cried. We didn't fix everything, but we started rebuilding. Here's what I learned. Forgiveness isn't a light switch. It's physical therapy, repetitive, uncomfortable, measured in millimeters instead of miles. My father hurt me. He publicly chose someone else over me. Those things happened, and they'll always have happened, but they're not the entire story. The woman who manipulated him is gone. The daughter who kept calling is here, and the relationship we're building now isn't the one we had before. It's something different, something we have to choose every single day. If you're listening to this and you've been erased from your own family, if someone blocked your number and rewrote your history, I want you to know you're not invisible. You are just in a room full of people who chose not to look. Don't wait 3 years like I did. But also know this, fighting for someone who's been manipulated isn't the same as fighting for someone who doesn't care. Learn the difference. My name is Rachel Chen. I'm 34 years old, and I got my father back. If you could go back and say one thing to the family member who hurt you most, what would it be? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one.